Virginia Giuffre helped vanquish a prince and a millionaire.
And I won't stop fighting. I will never be silenced.
But one of her toughest battles was a very private one.
It was the worst thing that could have happened to her. Her children were her life.
Virginia, a podcast from the newsrooms of The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and WA Today. Out now.
Can you all sound like bulldozers, please? Grrr.
Some of you may have seen a memorable video of Australia's richest person, Gina Rinehart, celebrating Pauline Hanson at a bush summit last month.
Pauline, may I invite you to the stage quickly, please? Ben, come and help me with the...
Rinehart had gifted the leader of One Nation an orange toy bulldozer to symbolize, it seemed, a hope that Hanson will cut through bureaucracy.
We actually need a beautiful, big, fat, where is it? It's coming. We need an orange bulldozer. Let's hear the noise. Grrr.
But Gina Rinehart is just one of several mega-rich donors who are flocking to the far-right political party. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris, and you're listening to the Morning Edition from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Today, senior reporter Sarah Danckert on the donations that are flooding to One Nation ahead of the state election in Victoria, and what donors are expecting in return. Welcome, Sarah, back to the podcast.
Thanks, Sam.
Now, you've written that ahead of the Victorian state election in November, One Nation has been absolutely scooping up donations from people who previously only donated to the Liberal Party. So can you just give the listeners an idea of who these people are and also what's driving this shift?
Yeah, it's a really interesting shift, and it's certainly a situation that's got the state Liberal Party in a bit of a flat panic. This was not a small aside. This is very much a trend, and it's a trend you're seeing in the polling, where you can see the increase of support or proposed support that they've got. In this case, Melbourne's private property developers are leading the charge. Now, Victoria is unlike other states. Victoria doesn't ban or limit donations by property developers, whereas they do in New South Wales. So if you're listening in New South Wales, you might find that a really unusual thing to hear, but in the great state of Victoria, things are done a little bit differently. So it's Melbourne's private property developers, and of course the city's synonymous with some big private property developers. These are your ultra wealthy types, and they're promising huge sums in return for advocacy. And on the other side, there's also entrepreneurs, and they're looking for changes to red tape, which, that's sort of what conservative politics often is about, removal of red tape, removal of green tape.
And specifically, these are people who in previous times would have ordinarily donated to the Liberal Party, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are rusted-on Liberal donors. These are people who in the past the Liberal Party could rely on for significant donations. These were sort of their true blue bloods, as they like to be known. Interestingly, not all are giving up their memberships to the Liberal Party, and some are also splitting their donations. So some are saying, well, if I used to give X amount, I will split that and I'll give a little bit to the Liberals and I'll give some to One Nation because I want two irons in the fire. I want double the advocacy, double the fun.
Right, double the fun. Okay, you might call it that. And so I guess give us some names here. Like, who are we talking about, and what is driving their move from being, rusted on Liberal supporters? And again, like you say, they may still be supporting the Liberal Party, but they're, they used to support the Liberal Party with their donations, and now they're sort of splitting some or all to One Nation. So who are they, and why are they doing it?
Yeah, so on a state level, that we haven't really outed these donors yet, and we can get to sort of, I guess, why. One of the reasons why is that there's still a level of shame, of One Nation donating shame. There's also people don't want to be questioned about their donation. So a long time ago, 2016, it's probably not that long for many people, but 2016, in the federal election, a Melbourne property developer called Bill McNee made a donation. He actually donated a plane long before Gina donated a plane to the party. It's not a new idea, Gina. So Bill McNee donated a plane and some other cash, and there were scores of articles written about Bill McNee's donation, and he was asked everywhere he went about his donation. And Bill McNee, of course, is one of our most reclusive property developers. He lives in a $50 million mansion in Toorak, and I'm sure a lot of people around the country would go, Bill who? And until he'd made his One Nation donation, he was largely unknown, despite being incredibly wealthy and successful. So some of the names aren't coming out. We do know that federally, of course, we've seen Gina Reinhart of Hancock Prospecting, and of course stockbroker Angus Aitken. He's a Sydney-sider. And he is previously donated to the Liberals as well, but he's also donated to Advance Australia, and has a view on, I guess, very much a business view in donating. It is about red tape. It is about work from home. For people he knows and other people in that group, federally, some of the changes to youth wages have really upset some business owners. So that's where previously you could pay a 16-year-old a lot less than a 22-year-old. And some people are quite upset about those changes there. So it seems like it's small beer, but you can actually see this bleeding into some of the national policy positions already. You can see it shaping up as to what One Nation will be in Victoria. And it's going to be not just a party based on migration and migration policy, but a party based on what would be quote unquote traditional liberal values or conservative liberal values, which is, lowering the amount of regulation. And that's what they say, the red tape, green tape. That's their sort of main push.
And I've got to ask you something that you mentioned earlier, which is so interesting because you mentioned shame there in terms of people perhaps not wanting to disclose that they donated to One Nation out of shame. Now, presumably you've spoken to some of these state-based property developers or the people around them. So why did they say they donated?
Because they want the taxes changed. So their main interest is a lot of these property taxes. The Victorian government's been pretty cash-strapped, been looking to raise money, and it's sort of found a tax for everything, and particularly vacant property taxes, and they want more advocacy, a greater amount of advocacy on these, what we would see as a niche topic. But for these people, if they spend their business buying up vacant property sites to do developments, in the 2 years they're holding that site, they're now getting charged taxes. And they feel as though, and this has got to do with, as much as it's got to do with opposing the incumbent state government, the Labor Party's policy on taxes, it's actually to do with a fissure within the Liberal Party. Because you've got to remember, these are Liberal donors and they're moving to One Nation. So in Victoria, we've got a more moderate leadership for the Liberal Party. Jess Wilson is much more progressive on a lot of issues and sort of much more, if it doesn't need fixing, I'm not really going to focus on it approach. And a great example is the work from home policy.
And so can you just break it down just briefly for those who've forgotten, specifically what the working from home policy is that some are so concerned about?
Yeah, so in the state of Victoria, they plan to mandate working from home 2 days a week. This will shift all sorts of companies into a situation where staff will be able to say, well, as a minimum, I can work from 2 days a week from home. And there's a whole lot of business owners in Victoria that are really, really upset about the work from home policy. And then you've got a Liberal Party that has got that much lower on their to-do list because they're worried about losing votes if they say they oppose the work from home policy, because it's really, really popular in some areas, and it's particularly popular with working women. And that's a great example of where the shame comes from. Some of the shame is not necessarily associated with One Nation's larger policies, of course, which they're synonymous for, i.e. monoculture or migration. Some of it is that the bosses don't want their workers to know yet, unless they're successful, that they've had any role in funding the dismantling of this work from home policy. So by shame, it's to do with not wanting to be associated with as much of what they're advocating for, because it is pretty contentious issues. But also I think the Bill McNee example is a great example. Bill did donate and, in the end he said that he would never donate to the party again simply because of the media attention he received. But, people don't want lists written about everybody who's donated to One Nation, just like, people cringe when we do up lists of who donates to the mayor. and stuff like that.
But this brings me to the next question, because all this influx of cash, though, that One Nation is getting is raising questions, right, about how and where One Nation is receiving its donations for the state campaign. So tell us a bit about that.
So far, they've only received 2 donations, at least according to the live database. It's so they've received 2 donations in the last 6 to 12 months. It's $6,239. It's not a huge amount of money, but the thing is that it's a very complex, dangerously complex situation, and that's because there's been a bit of an issue with Victoria's donation laws. So we had a situation where the state government tried to bring in caps, and those caps were challenged, and that went all the way to the High Court. And that placed the state of Victoria into basically a state of abeyance in terms of donation disclosures.
Dodgy, rigged laws. They would rather have no rules at all. They couldn't organise a chook raffle in a pub.
The major parties trading blows over the rush on new rules around political donations required after the High Court threw out Labor's last version because it wasn't fair. Would it be concerned for One Nation if donations are capped?
No, not at all.
There'll be a queue of donations waiting to be declared, because one minute they were saying the cap was this amount, the next minute the cap was going to be that amount. So people have been holding off on actually making the donations until there was clarity around this figure. There is now clarity, so to speak. The government's managed to reach a deal where they'll be able to cap donations at something incredibly low, like $5,030. But there's still a huge amount of problems with how, as you pointed out, how it's going to be disclosed. There's been a lot of ambiguity. And then there's also been strange conduct. So we saw Chip Legrand reported for The Age that the European by-election candidate, Darren Hercus, so we had a by-election down in one of our key seats, Chip reported that Darren was instructed to use his personal bank account to receive donations. Now, the party strongly denied those allegations because that's illegal. And so we don't have a huge amount of clarity as to whether they have a state campaign account, and that would be where the money would be received through there. We've got candidates saying that they would also be able to bring in their own donations. And so there's a lot of ambiguity over this. And without being unkind to One Nation, it's a party that has had a history and issues with keeping up with its disclosures. I think, we've seen more recently that it's been trying to ensure that all of its paperwork is very much up to date. It seems to be sensitive to that allegation. But we've been speaking to people throughout the week who know a lot about campaign financing, and even they concede that it's a really it's a tough area to navigate at the moment with this High Court challenge and changes to the caps.
After the break,
they plan to announce all of their 100 candidates on the same day as an idea that will bamboozle the media. I also would say that I and many other journalists accept the challenge.
Virginia Giuffre helped vanquish a prince and a millionaire.
And I won't stop fighting. I will never be silenced.
But one of her toughest battles was a very private one.
It was the worst thing that could have happened to her. Her children were her life.
Virginia, a podcast from the newsrooms of The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and WA Today. Out now.
And you've said that the donation situation in Victoria is dangerously complex. So how is this dangerous?
Well, it's dangerously complex because if you don't declare your donations properly, now I don't mean necessarily the donors, it's the onus is on the party, though I'm sure that there's a certain amount of onus on the donors as well. But, the party has to declare. The reason it becomes dangerous is that not declaring some of these donations can end up being an actual criminal offence. And so that's why it's dangerous, and certainly we've seen this issue with the party before. And it's an issue all parties face. It's an issue that from the smallest independent to the mighty ALP with its union backing and gifts of services from all sorts of law firms, that it's dangerous because you've got to ensure that it's correct. Because if you don't, it's a criminal offence. And then, of course, there's the reputation hit that comes from that. And that would be dangerous for One Nation, because I think One Nation is trying to put its best foot forward for this upcoming state election.
Yeah, and presumably if you can't manage your own party's finances, how can you be expected to manage the country's?
Exactly. And if you're caught lying about that, or caught making a mistake about that, what else are you going to make mistakes on? So it's a reputation issue, as well as it being, a technical breach of the law that is very serious.
Okay, but you have spoken to One Nation's only current Victorian representative. So what did she tell you about how the party is handling donations?
So she was really upbeat, actually, despite not being endorsed. I've never spoken to somebody who was so positive despite being, 5 months out from an election and not being endorsed. So she's told me she was receiving a lot of support. She's got donors lining up to give to her campaign. The other thing she said is that those donations are in abeyance until she's actually elected. She said that in the past that the party had always used a model where candidates were self-funded. So in the past they've used that model, and Ricky Lee was saying that they'll be moving to a model where it's sort of a mix, where it's donations and some self-funding or just donations. And that is an interesting situation as well, because if that model is applied throughout the rest of the country, it starts to become an arms race for who can bring in the largest donors, rather than it being necessarily the best man wins or the best person wins. Now, in America, that's really common. Of course, we all know that Donald Trump is fabulous at raising money. So it's not that uncommon, but it does create a situation where you've got people lining up for safer seats, safer positions. This is a party in the state of Victoria where no one's been endorsed, and they want to run 100 candidates in November. So there's going to be, the upper house seats are going to be seen to be much safer. Ricky Lee's in one of those. But the question is, are there other people in Bendigo? Are there other people from that region who can bring in more donors, might be more popular, and therefore Ricky Lee's overlooked? Now, I haven't seen any evidence that that's going to happen, but certainly it's striking to talk to a sitting member of Parliament in July when the election's in November, and they're saying, well, I'm not endorsed. I hope to be, but I'm not yet. So
now, is that an unusual situation? Because that strikes me as possibly unusual, only 4 months out before an election.
It is unusual for it to be this quantum. So I think the Liberals have got some people that they're still got to endorse for different seats. But there's also, with One Nation, it's 100 people who haven't been endorsed. They want to run 100 candidates. I understand that they plan to, this is what my sources have told me, that they plan to announce all of their 100 candidates on the same day as an idea that will bamboozle the media.
Bamboozle us how?
Oh, well, there'll be so many names to go through. We won't be able to find all the bad things about them quickly enough.
Right. Okay.
Not that there's going to be bad things to find about them, because they've been thoroughly vetted. But yeah, that was the sort of the vibe. I also would say that I and many other journalists accept the challenge.
Yeah. You're built for this, Sarah. This is yeah.
And I can feel the spreadsheet getting set up already.
Yeah, that's right. And Sarah, just to wrap up, I mean, if there is, of course, as you've written, this influx of donations to One Nation, is there any way for the public to find out where these donations have come from before they cast their vote, or is this something that's only made public after an election?
Yeah, so this is there's this live dashboard in Victoria where ostensibly you should be able to see your donations so that people can get the transparency that you rightly point out is what people want, and also, like, I guess, a true democratic value, right? The transparency is key to democracy. But as I said, the Victorian donation laws have been a bit wonky, up to the High Court, back again. So there's a lot of doubt about whether and when those things will get done and how much of it will get shown before the election. You don't have to declare the donation in the instant it's made. I think there's up to 3 weeks. So if people make their donations in November, you're not going to find out about it afterwards. And beyond that, there's also huge ways where donations can be structured, they can be funneled through different ways. It's not what the law intends or not what the law wants. So will you get the transparency you need? It'll be a better transparency. It will be clearer, but it's not going to be what we expected. So I think we're not really going to know until after the election who's been funding this.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for your time.
Thank you.
Today's episode was produced by Tammy Mills, and our podcasts are overseen by Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick. If you like our show, follow The Morning Edition and leave a review for us on Apple or Spotify. Thanks for listening.